Hey guys, Mike here. Thanks for tuning in. So today is part 2 of how to change a preset in Superior Drummer. If you haven't seen part 1 of this video, I highly recommend doing this now. You find the link, as always, in the top corner of this video or in the description box below. So in part 1, we talked about changing a preset with samples and instruments from the same library. And today it's got a little bit of more the complicated stuff, where we're going to add something from different libraries, because this will multiply the level of complexity. It's doable, but you have to consider some things. So without further ado, let's jump in. So I've loaded up the same kit as in part 1 of this video. It's the metal AOT kit from the core library of Superior Drummer. And last time we added just a third tom here for this kit, but now we decided we want to go one step further and want to replace or enhance the existing kit. So I'm going to show you two different things. First of all, changing an instrument and all the adjustment that need to follow in that case, and to stack another tom to this existing kit. So in the end, we're going to have two different toms. It's a similar approach, yet slightly different. So as a quick recap, here's the part how the kit sounds on its own, just a little loop with some tom action going on here. So fat, in your face, overcompressed metal kit, as we all love it. So today we're going to talk about this floor tom here, because this is the part where the floor tom has been played in this little bridge section here. So let's say we're going to say, no, I don't like this AOT kit. I want something fatter, something more punchy. And we're going to change that. So we're going to, by the way, just a little disclaimer. I won't talk about every single step that I do right now here, because I captured this in part 1 of the video. So make sure if you haven't seen that you watch it maybe before. For all you guys already watching part 1, you can follow along, I'm pretty sure. So we're gonna change this AOT tom here. And the first thing you need to consider is that you should pick an instrument from another library that has, let's say, a similar room characteristics when it comes to sound. If you're familiar, if you own some of different libraries and you are familiar with the sounds, it's really hard and tough to add something to a big room like that with, let's say, the custom and vintage SDX, which has a very, very tight sounding room. This is almost not, it is possible, but it comes with a lot of, let's say, hurdles and obstacles. So you should pick something similar to this. So we're gonna right-click the instrument here, click Search for Instruments. I've already pre-picked the Death SDX from the Death and Darkness, amazing library. And we're gonna pick the 14x16 Yamaha Recording Custom, which is the floor tom 1 in this library as well. So click, hit Replace, and luckily we see the new tom. So let's, without changing anything, let's listen now how this little beat here sounds just when we replaced the tom with this Yamaha tom. Not too bad right off the start, because the tom obviously sounds great on its own, but I still hear some differences, of course, because this floor tom, it has more direct signal now coming in instead of the bigger room sounding and the reverb that's going on the other toms from this existing kit. So what we're going to do first, let's check in the mixer section here. So you see this floor tom 1 channel right now that you see here is, of course, now the floor tom direct microphone coming from the Death library. The software is smart enough to just change that as a direct microphone. So what you're going to hear right now, and the same goes for the EQ here, this is the EQ, what you see in the screen, that has been made for the AOT kit. And here's, of course, the first problem, of course, because this is a typical, let's say, tom EQ curve, scooping out some of the mids and boosting some low ends, but probably it's not the exact same EQ setting that I would use for that particular tom. And we talked about this already in detail in part 1 of this series. The reason that people pick a preset is that they don't want to mess around with mixing and processing, or they have no clue what's going on, which is totally fine. But you should maybe at least to know the basics to now fine just. But we leave it now because I think this EQ curve is okay and the tom doesn't sound bad either. So we leave it here. What we're going to concentrate right now is to assign the different room microphones, which we remember from part 1, to match with the existing preset here from the core library of the Superior Drummer. So in the overheads, you see the floor tom 1 is automatically assigned because both libraries, of course, contain an overhead, pair of overheads. But as we replaced it and showed in the first part of this video, we need to adjust the volume here. Every one of those toms are brought down by roughly 7 dB. So let's do this for floor tom 1 as well. And let's have a quick check and listen. Still sounds okay. Now let's assign the room microphones. So for this, because you see here in the ambience ribbon microphone, the given pair of room microphones used in this preset and used for the core library, there is no, when you see here on the right, there is no floor tom 1 that you could pick. The reason is that the software, the moment you change an instrument, automatically assigns or reassigns pair of microphones depending on which library you get. Sounds complicated, but I'll show you what I mean. So for this, you go to the instrument that you just added, hit right click, go to more, and click Route Instrument Microphones. So what you're going to see here on the left side of this column where it says microphones, those are all the microphones that are the tracks, microphone tracks that you know from the Death and Darkness library. Here you clearly see, because you know from the Death, if you own it, that they capture the toms with a top and a bottom microphone. And what the software is doing, it automatically assigns or allocates the different microphones which are similar. So the floor tom top microphone from the Death and Darkness is going to the floor tom 1 of the core library. That's the reason you saw that in line with the other toms, because it's literally the same. But when we go now to the room microphones, you see here the pair stereo pair. You see 2 microphones always represent stereo microphone. The overheads from the Death library goes to the overhead dynamic microphone of the core library. Be aware, it's not the case, the software, that it emulates the sound of the room of the core library for this new instrument. What you're going to hear through the new overhead microphone is the room sound from the Death library. That's important to know, because sometimes when you choose different sized rooms, you will hear this effect that the tom sounds smaller or has less decay in its tone than the other instruments you picked from that preset in the first place. So that's what you need to internalize and to understand when you just add stuff from different libraries. Because in the end of the day, and this is what people still can't get their head around, we talk about acoustic recorded drums. And there are certain limitations when it comes to audio physics. You know, you cannot just like with a mouse click change everything. The Yamaha tom that we picked for this preset has never been recorded in this room that the core library has been recorded in. So there is no way that you will hear the Yamaha tom that we just replaced in the same room size of the Galaxy Studios from the core library, because it was never recorded there. I hope this was clear, because it's important when you start to change the settings and the EQ. But talking about further things, the overhead tube microphones are going into the overheads as well. So 2 different pair of overhead signals going into one now of the core library. And this is important now here. The Death library has a pair of ambience near and ambience mid microphones as well, and it's assigned to ambience near and ambience mid of the core library, because the core library has those pair of room microphones. So this is a clue. So now we know what to do. So now we go back to the mixer tab here. We go again here on the top, edit visibility, because you see in this preset, this metal AOT preset from that we picked, there was no ambience near and ambience mid microphone picked to create that preset, but we need it right now because the software sends the room microphones from the depth libraries into those different channels. So let's click Edit Visibility. And here we are, ambience mid, ambience near. First, again, just unhide them so you can make them visible. Collapse it again. And now when we go to ambience near, you see here on the right side, floor tone 1 is showing up, but it's not highlighted. In the ambience mid, it's highlighted. The reason for that is that that's the default setting from the depth SDX. When you open the depth and darkness SDX and you pick the depth part where the Yamaha is part of, you will see that by default, the kit is always, the ambience mid microphones are enabled by default, but not the ambience near. But that's an easy catch, just enable that here, the floor tone. And what we learned, of course, now, because they are ambience microphones, but let me say, we're gonna listen to them first, how they sound on their own. Let me quickly disable the reverb here because it's annoying. So what you're now gonna hear when I just solo the floor tom direct microphone and the two room microphones, you will now hear just the sounds coming from the depth library. There's nothing to do with the core library. But now we need to implement that into the existing preset. So first we're gonna assign, because now the two room microphones are going directly into the output channel, we need to assign it to the ambience bus that has been created for that preset. And let's have a listen again, unsoloed of course. That sounds weird, and we're starting to see the problems that I always want to address here. The reason why it sounds so weird is that all the processing that you see here on the ambience bus for that preset, whether it's this EQ or this compressor or even the following EQ, and all of this goes to another compression channel here right next to it. This whole stuff was meticulously crafted for the sounds and the instruments of the core library of Superior Drummer 3. So when you now add another instrument from another library, which was recorded in another room with another pair of microphones in another distance from the instrument, it was differently tuned. So it's almost a completely different instrument coming from somewhere else. And you cannot just throw the same processing just because it's a room microphone. You need to adjust now. And again, here's the problem. People picking presets, they don't know anything about mixing, which is totally fine, but they run into problems and they don't understand why this sounds shitty as it is. So what you need to do, or as let's say as a first idea how to solve that issue, is not to route those two microphones into the processing, but giving them an own channel. So instead of routing them to the ambience channel, if it sounds good, if you stack something that fits for whatever reasons into the given presets, then you're totally fine. My experience, most of the cases, it doesn't. So what I usually do, instead of just like loop it into the existing preset here, I create a new channel, which is in this case bus 10 because it's still unused. And let's say I call this ambience stack. So I know this is coming from the depth library. You can call it ambience depth, of course, as well. So now it's gonna sound different because now the ambience from the depth library doesn't get the heavy processing that we just heard from that preset. So what we can do now, of course, we can, let's check what they did here, just scooping out some mids. I think we can just copy that, that's fine. Yeah, it's just too much compression going on. 3 to 1, that's fine, but let's bring up the threshold back and listen how this sounds. So let's go a little bit more conservative here. Instead of, let me just quickly change here my mouse pad. And finally, some EQ. What they did here is like adding some high frequency at around 11K. So let's try this, if this works. You see, I already hear that this is probably too much for that room because the microphones and the whole room acoustics from the Death library is different. So let's bring this back in, maybe just adding a touch here, 1 dB, and going down to 10. And now listen in context again. Now it sounds okay. So now this was the option, just exchanging an instrument. Now let's quickly go back to default here and then load it again. So now everything is back where we started. Now let's stack something, because this is what I think most of you people are interested in. Do the same, right click here, go to more, add to the center articulation. Be aware that if you programmed a beat or you played a beat where you used rim shots, just the rim and more articulations, you have to stack every single articulation on its own. So this will of course multiply the different stacking options, but you will see what I mean in a minute. So again, let's pick the Death library here and the Yamaha recording custom. So we stack it on center, and first of all, again, let's listen how this sounds. First thing now when I stack stuff is that before I touch any of the routing, I just adjust the volume of the stacked instrument, because I use this stack feature just to enhance and to improve, let's say, the existing sound, not to replace it exactly. So I bring it down almost like inaudible and just bring it slightly up until I hear the effects and I hear this, let's say, the added volume and the added warmth and attack of this Yamaha custom. So now there I have a sound, let's say, consistency between them. But the same thing, when you now go to the mixer, as you now stack the instruments, what Superior Yamaha smartly enough does is the software gives this new stacked instrument, in this case the floor tom, its own channel in the mixer. So as we don't replace the floor tom right now, it still exists in the given preset. And now you have two different channels, in this case, floor tom top and bottom microphone, because it was recorded that way. So first thing what you're going to do is, of course, route this as well to the tom bus, because it's a tom. Bring this down just a little bit and just listen how this sounds now. When now the Yamaha, the stacked tom, gets the same processing from the preset. Cool. Just tiny things, make sure that the panning is exactly the same. You don't want one floor tom to be panned 30% to the right and the other one 50% to the right. Often forgotten. So let's check. This tom is panned 30% and this tom is panned 27%. It's a slight difference, of course, but just in case it's too big, and we are picky, of course. So bring this back to 27 here. And of course, the bottom as well. So that's exactly the same. But we still have the problem with the room microphones, and we have it again. So you see here on the overhead dynamic microphone, now here on the right side, now what Superior Yamaha, again, smart move, automatically does. Now it's stacked in the overheads because it has to handle with two. Click on Edit Stack and adjust the volume here. So bring it back again at 7 dB, just for consistency reasons. Again, in the Abian's ribbon microphone, there is no new floor tom added, because as for the first time, when you click on right click, route instrument microphones, it has created two new channels. What you can do now as an alternative, and you could do this already in the first example, instead of having the software routing the similar microphones to existing ones in Superior Drummer, you can give them their own channels to process them there. By doing this, just click here on the right, and instead of just picking one of the existing channels, click on Create New Channel for both microphones in this case. And when you now go to the Mixer tab, you will see they are called X amp, mid and near. This shows you clearly that this is the new ambience microphones from the stacked instrument. So now we're gonna hear them, and let's send them to the ambience. Again, let's try how this sounds. For me, the same problem as in the first example, it's just too much processing on the ambience compression here. So either you process them directly here on the track base, or you create a new bus, which I did in the first example, which I'm going to do right now. It's literally the same routing and audio signal flow. It's just that you have more control now, and you can process them individually, even with more EQ if you wish so. So let's call this again ambience stack. Bring it down just a little bit, start to copy the EQ and the compression here. And again, bring it up a little bit. So let's do a quick A/B before and after. I will mute here in the top right corner just the stacked instrument, and I want you to listen closely how close we can get, or if we improve the sound with this. There's certainly a little bit more warmth and attack going on, but you see what you needed to do right now just by adding one instrument. So now if you want to change, add 4 different toms and 6 different cymbals, this list here of stacked instruments will go on and go on, and even in the mixer window. And just for simplicity reasons, I would recommend, again, just to add stuff from similar sounding libraries, because otherwise you will run into big problems. Except, of course, you are able and capable of mixing and you know exactly what to do, then it's even fun sometimes. For all of you who just wants to pick a preset and just want to add something more because you are missing instruments, or you like that particular one from another library, whatever, you should go the easy way and use the existing preset as much as it allows you to do. And when you hear, like we heard in the first place here, when the ambience in this case was just too much for the edit instrument, then you create a new track just for the stacked instrument, so you can adjust more individually and accordingly. So that was it. Enough talking. I know it can sound complex. Hopefully I teached you the easy way that you understand. Now you have 2 videos stacking instruments and changing a preset from existing sounds from the core library or from the existing library where you pick the preset from, and changing a preset when you add stuff from a new library. This video could go on forever because there are so many different things you need to consider sometimes. It's just a starting point that I wanted you to understand the problems that can occur when you just add stuff, and it's not that easy just like by dragging, dropping a sound, because still people sometimes have this, I don't know, this understanding that it's a software and it's somewhat artificial and you just can create a sound with a mouse click. In the end of the day, it's an acoustic recorded instrument, and you need to understand the physics behind recording to get the most out of the software. If you have any questions, as always, guys, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great week making music. Thanks again. Bye.